There we go. Okay.
And you want to navigate to that slide? You go.
Which one you want to start on?
Yeah, good looking guy right there.
All right.
So it's actually the other presentation, right? Is the main
So you
one.
said the. Oh, okay. Okay.
Here, you want to?
Yeah.
Scroll
Is it
through it?
on there? That's my contact info. The one that said life as a freelancer.
Yeah,
That's the one that's
okay.
got the bulk of it. Yeah, this is some technical SAP stuff. Nobody
okay.
wants to see that.
There we go.
Okay.
This one.
You want to put that in?
Hey,
Yeah. Let me just.
you're welcome. Finally made it. Finally.
Can you access that? I don't know if you. Okay.
All right, so we're only going to hear audio for a small portion with some visual technical difficulties.
What do you have? HDMI?
Yeah, I think I got. All that will work. Yeah, I have an HDMI slot. Yeah.
Anyone listening to the stream, can you at least hear me? Yep, excellent. Okay.
Leave your side.
Thank you, Magic Chat.
And,
No, it didn't
Oh,
work on my computer. Yeah, I didn't even see all that. Okay. Well, Glenn is doing this setup. How are you guys doing? How's it going? So apologies about the delay here. Happy Thursday. Last day of the week.
Oh.
Yeah. So today we have a special treat for you. Glenn Allen is here. He is a freelance developer. Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
contract-based in Ithaca.
Yep, contract-based freelance developer based in Ithaca, and he's gonna be talking to you today about the whole environment around freelance development and that sort of thing. Glenn is an awesome guy, and he's been part of the Syracuse community. I remember when I was like 14, I went to my first open hack. Glenn was there, with his bike. So we're all really, really excited to have him, and you guys go. Awesome. Welcome, Glenn. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, good evening, everybody. Yes, my name's Glenn. I'm a freelance software developer. I've been developing software for probably 20 years. Don't want to admit that. Been around for a while. So my talk is going to be about freelancing, and more specifically, like my experience with freelancing. And I've done this talk a couple times for different groups, so some of it might not be appropriate or applicable to the careers in code, but don't worry, ignore it, skip over it. Okay, so just a little bit of background. So I grew up in the Hudson Valley, and when I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, I went on a field trip to IBM. Back then in the 80s, IBM owned the Hudson Valley. They had big plants in Kingston and Poughkeepsie. I went on a field trip and was just blown away by what I saw, the magnitude of the building, all the computers that they had. I mean, there was disks, software disks the size of like semi-truck tires. And the guy presenting the talk was a guy he was like a high school dropout, and he worked his way up. He started in a mailroom, went to school part-time, and there he was in a three-piece suit giving a presentation to the class. And I was like, man, computers, that's where it is. That's where the future is. So from that point forward, I planned my education to be a computer science person, computer science major. So when I first started, so everyone's ambitious, right? Everybody, back in the 90s, everybody wants to be a manager, right? That's what I thought, being a 20-something. So I worked real hard, and I got a master's degree. One of my masters is in engineering management at SU, with the idea of becoming a manager. And at some point along the way, I got a little disillusioned. Sometimes I have to be careful here because I realize you guys are being groomed to work for people. Okay, right. I don't want to offend our lovely sponsors, but I'm not a full-time employee kind of guy. I just have issues with politics and people tracking my bathroom time, and that's an extreme example, but things of that nature. It just drives me nuts. Performance appraisals, I mean, if they're done right, it would be great. But usually, in my experience, they're just an exercise to be performed. So full-time employment is not really for me. I really like being a freelancer, just doing a good job and getting paid well for what I'm doing. All right, so that's what this slide is talking about, how I kind of evolved to this position that I'm in now. All right, I forget what this was. Oh, okay. So ignore the question mark. I had some cool videos that I didn't get to work. But the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of me getting out of full-time, I was working at a local manufacturing company, and we were working on this pretty heavy-duty project. So we were implementing SAP, which is my specialty. Is, if you don't know, SAP is the third largest software company in the world. They sell software that most large businesses use to run their business. It's what's called an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. It does everything in a business from soup to nuts: human resources, materials management, inventory management, warehouse management, everything. And it's all integrated. All right. So I was working at this local company, working on this project, working hard, overtime, weekends. Had my boss calling me. I'm playing volleyball, at my volleyball league on Tuesday night, and I'm getting a call, and I'm ignoring the phone because I know she's calling me to come in and fix the problem. So I worked my ass off, and I got a really lousy bonus. I got like a $500 bonus, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I did all this work, and that's all. I mean, I just was so upset and angry at myself. I had a chance where I could have maybe talked to the boss ahead of time, maybe got a deal. Other employees had deals, but I'm non-confrontational, wimped out, and they didn't do the right thing. So after that experience, I'm like, this is not the way to go. I mean, working 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, and maybe getting a raise, who knows? Not for me. I'd rather be a freelancer. I get paid on the hour. Yes, I'm not going to be promoted to the CIO, but I'll get paid for what I do. And I'm going down the path of being more of a technical expert than, say, the management track. All right. So some business stuff. I'm not going to do too much about this because you can learn about this anywhere. I have an LLC. The name of my company is Excelsior Solutions, LLC. I just like that name, and I spent $200 or something, a couple $100, and got this official business designation. If you guys want to create your own company, you could do it in class. You can do it right now or later tonight. You can create your own LLC. But when you're self-employed, it's a good idea to have a company designation to work under versus, say, yourself versus a sole proprietorship. There's some like legal protections, things of that nature. And that's what everyone told me. So I created an LLC. So one of the benefits of being a freelancer, being self-employed, having your own company, you can deduct things, right? So I have a very nice GMC Terrain out there, brand new, bought it last year, completely writing it off. 32,000 bucks. I mean, not all in 1 year, but I'm writing that off against my income. Whereas employees, you're paying for your own vehicle, right? You don't get any help. So that's one of the benefits. I say don't get too crazy because you can get into trouble, right? I mean, business vehicle is reasonable. A business boat, not really too reasonable. You might get into some trouble. So you can write things off, but you want to be reasonable about it. And yeah, the last thing is get a good accountant. I took some entrepreneurial classes at SU, an entrepreneurial boot camp, and that was one of the big takeaways is don't mess around with the IRS. You know, make sure you're doing everything legal, and if you do want to try to write off the boat, he'll tell you not to do it. The accountant will tell you not to do it, or if you have a really good one, maybe he'll figure out how to do it. So get a good accountant if you're going to freelance and be self-employed. So this was a slide. I had a little video of Braveheart. Remember Braveheart? He's like, freedom! So to me, it's kind of like being a freelancer is. You take the jobs that you want. You know, you don't have to be somewhere every day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. If you want to take a 2-month vacation, you can do it. You're not going to get paid, but you can do that. You can, if you want to backpack through Ireland for 2 months, you can do it. You don't have to beg your boss, try to get paid time off without pay or blah, 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 whatever. And they probably don't want to let you go that long because they need you, right? So that's what I mean by that. You have freedom. Okay. Great aspects. So typically what happens is you do get compensated well. The rule of thumb is you should be making like an hourly wage about like double what a full-time employee is making. So 70 grand a year is like 35 bucks an hour. You should be looking at like 70 an hour as a freelancer. Because they're not giving you benefits, you're not getting vacation time, you're not getting a 401k match, you're not getting all the stuff that employees get. You're not getting training, right? You're on your own. So as an example here, this was my biggest payday I ever had. I had a $40,300, but there's more. I worked my ass off for that check. I really worked my tail off. I had a project in Florida where things didn't go well. They tried to go live with SAP too early, and there were lots of problems. So it required a lot of overtime. I was working from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, Sunday through Saturday. And a couple of days I did a swing shift, where it was literally like 21 hours. Like one day was like 21 hours, and I think another one was like, 19. So, I mean, it was like worse than prison. You know what I mean? I was just working it. And I have a little tweet here. I gave a tweet December 4th, 2016. I got up early, took a picture. It was beautiful. There's palm trees, but I'm going to be working for 14 hours. It doesn't matter. I'm in Florida. It didn't matter. I could have been in the North Pole. That was the only sun I was going to see. So nice payday, but I mean, I didn't have a life for a month and a half, and Thanksgiving too. Like I worked right through Thanksgiving. It was crazy. So in summary, you can do well. You're compensated for every hour that you work. Also, a perk is travel. So yeah, I was in Orlando. Didn't really get to enjoy it too much. One night I got to go out, but I've been to Baltimore, Long Island. Indianapolis. So I've had the chance to travel and see other places, which is kind of cool. Right now I have a project in Ithaca. I still live here. I live in Syracuse, but I drive to Ithaca on Sunday night, and I come back on Thursday. and I stay down there, and I get to kind of take in all, the Ithaca culture. And and all the time that I've lived in Syracuse, I've only maybe been to Ithaca 2 or 3 times. So now I've done it all down there. It's a cool town if you can come. So that's a benefit. You get to travel, see things. So not every project, but some projects you get to travel. There's some weird perks. Depending on the company that you're working for, I worked for a cutlery company in Long Island, and I was able to take home a bunch of, they had products that didn't sell, and they just had all this stuff available for people to take, employees, contractors, anybody. So I've got like corkscrews and knives, and I've got all big serving spoon. I got all this stuff. I also worked for a company called Marchand, also in Long Island, that they're a designer frame company. And I was able to, twice a year, they allow their employees and contractors to buy those products at cost. So I was able to do that. And one day I, bought a couple of Salvatore Ferragamo frames that are like $200 frames for $20. That was my holiday gift. That was my holiday gift that year. The last, say, positive aspect of freelancing is typically you're working with the best people in the field. Okay, it's a really great way to learn. So I might be on a project and there's maybe 5 developers there, right? And all of them are usually pretty decent, and we get to learn from each other. So that's also a perk. And then, like I said, you get to travel around. You work at different environments. You see how different companies do things. That also makes you like the better developer, better consultant. Okay, crappy aspects of freelancing. So if you're traveling, not all freelancers travel too, by the way. There's a lot of people that do remote. Matter of fact, in Ithaca, like everybody's remote down there. They work for companies all over the world, and they're all remote. So you don't always have to travel. But if you are a traveler, so for me, I'm out of town half the week. If you have, a wife or, significant other and kids, you're not there, right? You're on the road. You're a road warrior. So that partner needs to be independent. They can't be calling you up every 5 minutes when Junior, swallows gum or something, right? They have to have an independent partner. It helps to have an independent partner. And relationships are also tricky. I mean, again, you're trying to date or you're trying to maintain a relationship. Half the week, you're gone. And that's a strain on any relationship. They probably like the money, but it's nice to be there too. Another downside, when you're self-employed, you have to pay double the taxes for Social Security. So when you're a full-timer, you have to pay like 7.5% of FICA, and then your employer picks up the other 7.5%. But when you're self-employed, you're doing both. So you got to pay double, which sucks. You get a credit for it on another spot on the tax form, but yeah, it's rough. Yeah, Will. Oh, you give me 5 minutes. All right, 5 minutes. All right. Another thing that I have to deal with, sometimes these jobs pay well, so there's a lot of competition. Sometimes it can be cutthroat. There's something called an H-1B visa that maybe some of you have heard. It allows foreign people to come here and work, and in my field, it's a big issue. They're supposed to be getting paid the prevailing wage, but in reality, they're getting lower rates, and it's lowering everybody's rates. So that's a possible issue. Since the companies are paying you well, they don't want to keep you that long, right? They rather convert to an employee if they can. Another tough time, another problem, you're not always working, So does anyone know what this is? What is it? Right. This is a Medicaid card. You qualify for this when you have little to no income. And unfortunately, I've had times where I've been out of work for a year. And it doesn't go by the money you have in the bank. You could have $1 million in the bank. But if you only made 10,000 bucks in income, you qualify. And I've, don't spread this around. Can we cut this out of the video? No.
It's not even the extreme.
Okay, all right, great. So yeah, you could be out of work. You don't have a stable full-time job. Okay, let's see. Okay, real quickly, some lessons I've learned. You're making good money. You can't blow it on everything. You can't buy, Corvettes and everything else. You got to put the money away. You still got to pay Uncle Sam. You got to pay quarterly. So you got to be responsible with your cash. You have to be tricky when you're dealing with companies and clients. Like one time I made a mistake. One of my first projects, I said, well, I don't know what that is. And a senior consultant said to me, hey, Glenn, man, you never say you don't know. It's okay for an employee to not know. But when they're paying you $100 an hour, that guy doesn't want to hear you. The boss doesn't want to hear you say, you don't know. Why am I paying this guy for? You say something like, well, I'll get back to you. Let me get back to you. But never say I don't know. Let's see. Stay true to yourself. I think I'm going to skip that. You do need to have some principles and ethics in your business. You got to be careful what you promise, what you can do. Sometimes you can get away with over promising what you can deliver, but you don't want to get crazy because you don't want to ruin a relationship and screw over a potential client. Sometimes it's better to be honest in many cases. That's not the same story, but similar principle. Okay, any questions? Would you mind pulling up my last slide, Julie? The one that works. You guys have any questions? I kind of went through that fairly quickly. Sure, go ahead.
So when you decided to leave your 9-to-5 job and start consulting, where did you actually start from? Did you have a network of contacts? How did you get started?
It's a good question. So for my very first project, let's see, I basically used Dice and Monster and those websites. I just applied to those websites, and I found a project in Long Island. Yeah, it took a couple of months, and then it steamrolled from there. I made connections there. I had a relationship with that recruiter, so the projects after that became easier and easier. Because now I have an email list of 150 recruiters, and when I know I'm coming available, when I'm going to be, let's say I'm available January 1st, 2020. In October, I'm sending out, my resume to these 150 recruiters saying, hey, I'm coming available. What's coming up? And I start scouring the websites and things of that nature. That's how I get my work. Or they'll contact me too. I'm on their database. So when they need an SAP guy, with this, that, and the third, I'll get an email, and if I'm interested and available, I'll respond. One last thing I'll share too. Oh yeah, here's my contact info. I think it's great what you guys are doing. I think we need developers. It's a great field. For me, it's been awesome. I mean, there's been ups and downs, but by and large, I'm challenged every day. Yeah, it's like you're solving problems and you're helping people. You're satisfying your customers, your clients. It's very rewarding. I would say, I know that this field is maybe not for everyone. So even if you're having some challenges, maybe you don't feel like you don't want to be a developer. There are so many other peripheral careers. I mean, there's analysts. You could be in sales. You could sell this stuff or manage it. People in those roles kind of need to know what's going on in development though. So even if you don't feel like this is what you want to do, there's other roles in this field that we need you for and want you for. Okay. And yeah, here's my contact info. Feel free to link in with me. I like to network and help people. So yeah, feel free to link in with me. I'm on Twitter. Got a YouTube video that just shows me doing talks like this, like once a year. All right, yeah, and you can, if you have another question, something comes to you later on, feel free to email me, and I'll try to help. All right, thank you very much.
right, so we'll just take a quick 3 or 4 minutes to get switched over everything, in case anyone needs a quick break, and then we'll be back very shortly. All right, so I'll share this again. And we're back. Okay, so did anyone see the post I did earlier for the code for the components that we've done so far? Put it in the CIC students channel. Okay. It's there. I'm going to do that again after tonight as well. So if anyone falls a little behind and is just paying attention to what we're doing, and then you plan on coding a little bit more up later tonight or over the weekend, we'll do that as well. I'll also add a lot more comments into it too. So underneath the classroom sandbox, CSE students in Slack. Yep. Just pull it up real quick. So it's in the Careers and Code sandbox under my name in the Byte folder. You'll see the source folder here. This is literally just the component stuff. It's not any of the other logic because I didn't want to go through the rigmarole of like handling the whole git merge and all this other stuff. So all the components we've coded thus far, plus the index.js file as well to import all that stuff and get it going. So just to make sure that those files look like this, if you need to go back on that, and I'll push the rest of it tonight too as well. Yes.
Had it too. I got an email from GitHub telling me one of my components had a severe vulnerability.
Oh yeah, GitHub's great at doing that, pointing things out. It could be the smallest little thing in some package that's referenced by some other package that's referenced by some other package.
Okay.
It's just to let you know that that's there.
That's not what is vulnerable. Just a place where you can get hacked, like a security vulnerability. What does that mean?
Possibly, like depending on the severity of the vulnerability, you basically just have to follow the trail to see, like maybe you want to use a different package because that one has the vulnerability and another one doesn't. There's a lot of packages that reference the same package somewhere, and so it's kind of hard to avoid that once in a while. All right. Okay, so where did we leave off? We left off on, I believe, the inventory page. Right, so if we head over to there, let me just move my screen around slightly. There we go. And we have just some data showing up. Does everyone have this at this point? Okay. Now, if we look at the live app, real quick, not that one, this one here. Let's look at, I just want this. I'm going to paste this into the chat again. So you can follow along with it or have it as a reference. And I'll reopen that just as the app itself. All right, so on the inventory page, you can see these are highlighted. So these look like links. They are. So these are going to navigate to that particular product's info page. So we can set that up. And also we have some sorting that's going on. I'm going to try to get, depending how we're doing with the navigation of these links, I may push the sorting part till later so that we can get some more pages up and going so we can practice our routing and things like that and pulling more data into our components and maybe have some homework to look up some sorting algorithms or something like that and that we can implement on Monday. We'll see how it goes. Depends how far we get. But there's plenty to do and there's still plenty to learn. No shortage of that. Okay. So we'll work on getting these linkable, I guess. Turn these into links that go to some product page. So to do that, we'll head into our table.js file. And if you remember, does anyone remember the component we need to get import that allows us to link to another part of our application? Give you a hint. That's for state in the component. So we're using React Router, specifically the React Router DOM library. So we need to pull the link component out of that. Yeah. So we'll say import link from React Router DOM. If you want to copy it from like header.js, instead of typing the whole thing out, that's a great shortcut. Those are my shortcuts. Copy, paste. They work. Now this is saying it's compiling with warnings because, first of all, I'm not using that link component. And even when I do put it in this particular component, we don't have a place to link to yet. So we'll have to set that up. Yep. Better?
You say that was from React Router down.
Yes. Is this a good size font? We're in table.js. All right. So the link is on the product name. And our product name is part of our render body function return. Right? We've got these TD elements with the item dot property name here. We're going to want to wrap this particular one in a link. So we could say link. Close that tag. I'm just going to save it at this point. Now you can see we have, these are links. I'm not going anywhere, but it's rendering properly, so we know we did something right there. And the link tag takes a to prop. And we need to send it somewhere, right? So I'm just going to leave that blank for now. We'll have to create a component that's going to be rendered on our screen when we navigate to that particular route. So in our components folder, we'll create a new file. We'll call it product.js, because that's relevant. And inside here, we'll import React from React. Actually, we'll do this. We'll go to shipments.js, and we'll use that as our boilerplate. And we'll just change the name, so we can at least see something on the screen. Well, we won't need the p tag, but excuse me. Okay. All right. Let me know when everyone's at this point. They've got some basic.
I lost mine. I lost the data.
Okay. Something might not render in this whole process because we're kind of like between things. Yep. Okay, that's fine for now. Yeah, we'll get to that. But everyone have a product.js file created? Okay. So the main div that we're going to return in here, we're going to give it a class name of product-page. We have that custom CSS that's going to handle our base styling. And if there's enough time, we'll go through that custom CSS file to show how all this ties together. I know styling was still a concern for some people, so definitely want to address it. And inside here, we'll create another div. We're going to give that a class name of product-info. So we have a class that's going to style the particular page, quote unquote, and we'll have a class that's going to style the elements within that page. We'll just plug in an H4, whatever header element you want to use. And that's going to be product.name, oops, lowercase. Oh, we haven't got the product.name yet. Jumping ahead. Let's just render the word product name. So we want to see something on the screen. Because we're not passing in data just yet, so we want something to show up though. Add a p tag underneath that. We'll say product ID. And another p tag, which will say description. Right. If we look at, I'm going to pull up the byte data.json file, close inventory, open up products. You can see our products have 4 properties on each object. There's an ID, the name, the description, and an image. And we want to use that image as the background for that page. So this is all the data we're going to need to display in this particular component. But we do need to grab that data. And right now, we're using JSON server to grab our other data. Does everyone have both? Has everyone typed npm start and npm run JSON server yet? We done that? Okay, so we'll want to get to that point.
The JSON server is in the data file or slide file?
So if we go to a terminal, if you do a split screen terminal,
Yeah.
You're going to cd into your client folder. You'll type npm start in one, and then the other one you'll cd into the client folder again and type npm run JSON server. So that's probably why you're not seeing your lines. Yeah, your JSON server is not running. And I remembered liquids this time. So let me know when everyone's got their development and JSON servers are up and running. We have something over here. Oh, it looks like Chiquay needs to get let in. Oh, cool. Okay. And Caitlin, how are you doing on that side over there? Awesome. Okay. Is everyone good, or do you still need some help? Yep. What do we got? No, you're in the client folder, so you just need to do npm run JSON server. How you guys doing over there? Good? At first I thought you were going to tell me no. I don't know if you needed to get that out one more time.
No, I gave you one already.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So in our React router, there's several ways to, I don't know what I was about to say there. Let me just go to the app.js file. So we have our router, and inside we have our routes. We've established that already. if we hit this path exactly, / we'll get to the home page. If we hit this path, we'll go to the inventory page. So we are going to need a route to go to our product page. We'll have to import our product.js file at the top. Or our component from that file, rather. However, it's not enough just to navigate to that route. How do we know what product we're actually going to need to display? We're not just going to magically pull one out at random, because if we click the backpack link, we should see the information for the backpack, not necessarily a canteen or hiking boots. So routes have the ability to hold data in them that you can share to the components. And those are parameters. So our route parameter starts with a colon, and then you just give it a name. So every single route component gets passed props from router. And let me just pull up the documentation for it. It's easier to talk to the docs or talk with those being shown. React Router. And React Router's documentation is by far one of the best document sites that I've seen for React components. It's really simple to use. It's easy to navigate. There is a lot that can be done with these routers, but you can get away with a really great setup without much configuration just by following these docs. So URL parameters. So when I click this Netflix link, this ID of Netflix, this piece of information is being passed via the route, via that URL. So if we look up here at Netflix, we could say this goes to Netflix. And then we're expecting, yes, child. Let's see what we got here. Oh, that's just the link. Component is child. And then its path is this /ID. That ID is the route parameter, or URL parameter, I'm sorry. And if we look at the child component, we see this thing called match.params.id. Every component that's rendered by a route gets passed a prop called match. And inside that prop, it's an object that has different properties. So match has a property called params, and params represent all the parameters that are inside that URL. Then we just have to pick the one we need. So in this case, match.params would have a proper name of ID because we've defined it up here in the path. Does that make sense? And so if we go into our application, and we say, product/ID or :ID, our product component that's going to be rendered is going to be passed a prop called match. And we could say props.match.params.id to grab that particular piece of data. And we can pass anything we need to in this. It just so happens that our byte data product has an ID. So we'll probably want to pass that one because that's a unique identifier to display this particular product. So let's go over to, oh, I'm already in here. Go back over to app.js. Or no, I'm sorry, not app.js, product.js. We've already defined the route. And inside here, we're going to be expecting, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say props. This will be all the props that are passed to product. And before my return statement, I'm just going to say const ID equals props.match.params.id. So that match again is that prop that the router gives to this, or the route gives to this component. Params is a property on that match object, and that's an object itself. And each property on that object are all the parameters that we've passed in our URL. There's only one, so there's only one we have to worry about, but you can do multiple. You can get pretty crazy with routing. You can pass a lot of data through it, but you also need to be careful with that. You don't want to pass sensitive data through a URL because it's plain text. So if you're passing user information or passwords, guess what? Anyone who goes to that URL gets to see that stuff. So we don't want to do that. So generic information like an ID. Well, that ID is useless to most people because they don't know the database it's coming from or what it even refers to, right? You can even get fancy and create hashes of the data you want to send if you want it to be really, really secure. Like you don't even want them to know what that even means. But for our purposes, just passing an ID is fine. And down here, we also need to know, well, which product, right? So we're going to use state. Or I'm sorry, not use state. Yes, use state. And use effect. And we're going to do something similar to what we did in the table.js file, or I'm sorry, the inventory.js file. We want to grab our data from the backend because we need to be able to pull that stuff out. That ID is useless if we have nothing to use it against. All right. So first thing we're going to do is we've got that ID. Then we're going to say const product set product equals use state. And we're just going to give it an empty object because by default, we don't have one yet. We haven't grabbed it from our backend, but we want something there. Is everyone there? Okay. So anyone remember how we use effect? We call it, and it takes two parameters. The first one's a function. Second one's an array of dependencies. And we're going to fetch our stuff from the backend. Now we're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to go over to inventory, and we're just going to copy this. We've already done it, so there's no need to retype everything out. But we are going to change one thing, and we're going to change inventory to products. But we can't just set the data to that. That's going to be an array of all the products. We want to get our very specific product. So instead of saying set data, because that's actually not data, we should be setting product. We want to grab out our unique product from that list of products. So I'm going to change this JSON variable to say products because when I'm looking at this code, let's say 3 months from now, I know what that means. It's like, oh, what's JSON? It could be anything. It could be a list of beer or something. Okay, so inside, take a quick look at our products again. So what this is going to return is going to return a list of 3 objects, and we want to pull out the one that is our product ID that we're going to be passing in. So to do that, we'll just say let. We already defined product up here, so we don't want to reuse that, right? Because it may think we're trying to pull from that particular scope. So we'll just say, and I do this a lot, I'll say filtered product, because we want to filter out just our product. and that equals our products. We want to filter. Does anyone remember what filter takes? Remember we did filter, map. So filter takes as its first argument a function, and that's a callback function. So for every element in this list that we're trying to filter, it's going to call this function, and that function needs to return true or false. If we return true, it's going to return the element. If it returns false, it's going to basically not return it. It's going to exclude it from the result. And filter is going to give us back a new array of all the elements where that condition was true. So for us, we'll just say products dot, and I don't want to say product again, so we'll just say prod. Naming things is hard because you could reuse the same name over and over and like, oh my gosh, how many more ways can I write product? We only want to return ones where our product ID matches the one that came from our route. So as long as prod.id equals our ID up here, right? So you see it's highlighted here. Oops, I don't want the semicolon. That should return me an array of objects where there's only products that have that ID. But should be one product because we shouldn't have multiple products that have this share the same ID. But that filter is going to give me an array. So does anyone know how we can get the first element out of the array? I'm sorry? By the index. 0. First one. Now, if that array returned no elements, our result's going to be undefined. And that might throw some exceptions. So for the purpose of this application, we're going to go down what's called the happy path, and we're not going to throw any error handling in here right now. We're just going to assume that that product ID is going to be there because it's being passed in our route. But I wouldn't do just this in like a production application. You'd want to have some extra logic in there to say, hey, if there are no products in this array, so if the array is empty, well, then do something else. In fact, let's just do that because that's a good practice. So I'm not going to grab the first element right now. I'm just going to say let filtered product equals this resulting array. And then we'll say, well, we'll say filtered products. Let's change that to filtered products. Because if we get more than one, which we shouldn't, but if we do, the name makes sense. And then below it, we'll say filtered product equals. And then we want to check to see if we have any elements in our array. So we'll say filtered products dot length is greater than 0. So if there are more than if there's more than nothing in the array, there's at least one thing, then we want this to be filtered products, the first element. Otherwise, just some empty object. And it's giving me, oh, sorry, my syntax is backwards. Question mark comes first, then the colon. So if filtered products at length is greater than 0, that means we have a result. Then we're going to set filtered product equal to filtered products, the first element. Otherwise, just some empty object. Right? We don't want it to be undefined because the code below, we're going to be trying to reference the properties off this product object. And if it's undefined, well, that's going to fail miserably, and we're not going to have anything rendered to our screen. Yes? Does that help? Do you want to move closer too? You can just move the table, or do you guys want to share the table here? I'm trying to balance font size and screen real estate. It's kind of difficult. Okay.
Like filtered product and filtered product.
Yes. So filtered products is the array, the filtered array. Ideally, there should only be one thing in there, but the filtered product is the single item that comes out of that array. And I could have chose shorter names, but I wanted to make sure it was verbose enough that you'll understand what that is. Oh, yeah, longer names also trail off the screen faster. But if I save this, oh, okay, so Prettier is going to put this on a new line for me, so I can put that back so we can see where we're at. Let's check. Oh, okay, so not start. Flat filtered products equals products equals products not filtered. So you're just missing the left filtered products. I'll leave that on screen for another few seconds here. But does this make sense so far? Okay. Filtering coming back. So these tools like filter and map are not just useful just in plain old JavaScript, but it's useful in things like this inside other frameworks. Since React is literally just JavaScript at the base level, we can use any JavaScript we want to create the components that we need. So filtering over products, mapping over a list of things and turning them into other components, which we're going to do for our list. Did we do that for table? Yeah, we did that for table, right? So we turn just an array of objects into table rows in a table, and that's pretty cool. And all we did was just write plain old JavaScript functions. Okay, everyone all set? Almost? Okay, need a second? Okay. And today we'll take our break at 7:30. I told everyone it's going to be better at breaks. We'll take our break there. All right. So now that we have a filtered product, we need to put that somewhere. We're going to say set product, filtered product. So that's going to store it in our state up here. Filtered product will become product in that const product set product array. All right. So down here, where we have all this information, we want to substitute product name for product dot name, right? Yep, product dot name. So because we have a name property. We also have a description and an ID. So product ID, we'll just say product dot ID. And probably no surprise, we'll do product dot description or the description. Okay. There's one more thing we'll need to do, and we also need to use that image, right? Because we actually want to display that image as our background. But let's get our route working before we do that. Right now we have a component that's going to render some product information on the screen. That's pretty much it. We have a route that's set up in app.js to look for a route with product and some sort of ID as a parameter. Inside table, we have a link. We need to finish this part, right? So this link's going to be wrapped around the product name. And that's going to go to product. In fact, we're not going to use double quotes. We're going to use curly braces and a couple backticks. So does anyone remember the string interpolation? Does that seem familiar? Yes. For entering in variables and JavaScript expressions. So we're going to go to /product/ and then $curlies. We want the item.id, not div, ID. Okay. Because that's what we have access to, right? So that's what we want to send in. We don't want to send the product name because that's not what we're trying to pull out of the database to find that particular product. There could be 28 products that share the name backpack, but they should have different IDs. That should be the unique identifier among that data set. So when we click this link, it's going to throw this into the URL. Our router is going to pass that information along down to its children, and all the routes are going to go, do I match? No. Do I match? No. No. And then this one's going to say, yes, I match that product. And whatever's after that second slash, I'm going to use that as my ID URL parameter. So if I click backpack, it's dark text on a dark background, but we have our data that's pulled out of the database, filtered down, and then now it's displayed on our screen. So if I hit back, like hit hiking boots, I should see hiking boots and all that stuff. And same thing with canteen. Is anyone seeing that yet? Which one? Table? So table, we want to set this link. Make sure they're backticks and not single quotes. How we doing out there in Magic Chat Land? Are we seeing any of this? Awesome. How are we doing over here?
The break, it's top.
Oh, okay. Should we just keep going?
Yes.
Okay. Chiquay?
Yeah, I think I'll just talk for a second.
Okay. What I can also do at the break, kind of instead of waiting till tonight, at the break we'll take this code that we've done. I'll push it up to the repo so everyone can get on the same page. And that way you can absorb what we're talking about, if you're a little behind. And then everyone will be on the same page code-wise, and we'll just make sure we're starting at the same point. I want to make sure that at least routing is understood, and that you know that, okay, we're pulling stuff from the database. We're going to get into more. We're going to do different ways of doing that next week, but this is the basic way that you're going to do it. And just by understanding that is going to be a huge, huge help, right? So we'll get you all set. We'll be good. All right. And I'm on React Router's documentation. It's like, that doesn't look like my app. It looks good, but it's not mine. Okay. All right. Let's go back here for a second. We'll be right with the screen for a second. Oh, this is just a warning.
Right, but when I went to the menu, it gave me I'm just not reading about mine.
Okay, because properties not being set, but the product's not being set. So let's go back into your this is okay. This is running. That's good. Let's go look at your word fetch. Word fetch from here. Oh. Oh, these need to be square brackets.
Oh.
It's giving you back an array,
Not an object.
not an object. That's why it's
Okay.
That's why it's a type error. Thank you. Okay, so we have that's products. I tell you, no joke. I've spent 2 hours on a typo before. Oh, you got one more?
Oh, my God. Oh. Don't
Link
look
is
funny.
fine.
They're gonna be dead. Pow. I know, but
Okay, so inside table there's something.
maybe
that's
I
not-
just say that to make you feel better. I think so. That's what I think.
No, I actually think
And I probably was here to this for hours. And never wanted to. It did. It's still.
Oh, go back to your. It's thinking you're trying to do white space. So, yeah.
It's still helpful.
Yeah, now it's
To do it.
Now it's something else. That's okay.
No, it's fine.
Oh, but yeah, let's go back and see. Maybe it's okay. Back to
Also check. Not actually fire. But it should be 3,000. Yeah, her app is running 3,000. Yeah. So we definitely, we're not actually using it. Bryce, the typos. Yeah.
I'm telling you, there. Okay, sorry that took so long. I should have had a better eagle eye on that one. Okay. We have time. Okay, time-wise, we're good. Okay, so now that we're all displaying products on our page, let me open up my demo app here. Okay, so now we need to get that image onto our page, because right now it's just this. I mean, that's great. We can see the information, but we want to see the image of this product too. Because if we look at our demo app over here, it pretty much takes up the whole page. So part of the styling that's applied to, if I go to product.js, this product page, part of that styling is to set it up so that whatever image is displayed, it's going to take up the entire background of that page. But we can't just change the class. The class is what it is. Those are the styles that it has. But what we can do is we can add another property to it. And we can do some inline styling. We could say style equals. Now style takes, did any of this, did Alice go over any inline styles? Okay. So this syntax is going to look weird at first, but it'll make sense in just a second after I put some space around it. So the style prop takes an object, and that object has key value pairs based on what CSS properties you want to pass to it. So if I had, let me pull up a CSS file. Let's go over to, so product page. Product page has height, background size, and padding. So what we would want to do is we would want to add a background image or background with a URL to point to that image. But we can't do it in our CSS file dynamically from our component. But if we pass in an object to the style prop, we can use the CSS properties as the key, and the value is the value we want applied to that particular CSS property. So we'd say style equals open close curlies, and then we pass in 2 more curlies. And this curlies are the object that we want to pass to be converted into CSS. So just like product page class has a height, we can define height. We can do stuff like that. You don't have to type this height in. We're not going to change that part. But it's an object, so you have to do key value separated by commas. Whereas in CSS, it's key value ends with a semicolon. That semicolons aren't allowed in objects, so we have to use the object notation. This is just one way to do styles in React components. I could say padding, 50, right? And those will be applied as CSS styles. What we want is background. And we're going to do 2 backticks because we're going to do some string interpolation here. Because what we need, if we look at the CSS file, background takes a URL property or a URL text. Inside these parentheses is the URL where we're going to find the image. So we want to say URL. And inside the parentheses, we'll put our $ curly braces. And if you remember from the bytedata.json file, we have an image property on our product. So we can say product.image. And that will be applied as CSS to our component, or our element, rather. So we'll save that. And now I see a backpack. However, there's one thing about this backpack. Oh, okay, yeah. So the class that's on top of, I closed the styles. You'll see the background size is set to cover. Cover means it's going to fill the background with that image as best as it can in the same aspect ratio that that image is shown, right? So as your element gets larger, the image is going to get larger. It may get more pixelated, but it will get larger. And it's going to grow not so much as so if I shrink the window, the image isn't going to shrink in only one direction. It's going to shrink down in the same aspect ratio, right? So if you've ever used some sort of photo manipulation software and you grabbed a corner and transformed an image, right? And you hold the shift key down and it shrinks it to the same aspect ratio, right? That's what cover is doing for us. Now that's a plus if you want to fill the page and the image is large enough to do that. It's a minus if your image does not have the same aspect ratio as the element that it's containing it. So if your element's very vertical and you have a very wide image, the image is going to be shrunk down and it's going to be at the top at the same aspect ratio, right? It's going to fill to the edge of the border of that element as long as that aspect ratio is good. It just so happens that we have an image that is a little bit more horizontal than vertical, and our website page is a little bit more horizontal than it is vertical. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to shrink this down. If I can grab the side of it. And in this case, see the white space? aspect ratio doesn't match anymore. So it's only filling it to the width, not the full height. Now it's starting to get there. So it's nice to be able to do that as long as your images match the elements you're putting them in. So just something to be careful of. All right.
Is there anything you can do to make the backpack show when you make it now? Backpack is your entire.
Like that.
Yeah.
Use a different image.
That's what
Or
I figured.
or you could do like what are called media queries, and as the screen shrinks, you apply a different image for that one, right? Maybe a more vertical image. Yeah, yeah. Or use a different background property altogether, or use an image tag. And I don't really use image tags a lot. I've never really had a need to, even though I'm a photographer and I had a photo website. I applied everything as like background images and styled them that way. But you can totally use image tags too. Just make sure that you're aware of the properties that are available to those tags, so you know how to style your images properly.
Like the property if you're gonna inline the images, I think there's like a object cover. We'll do the same type of background stuff.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So if I go to inventory, I click hiking boots. I see the top part of some hiking boots. Right. Okay. So that is how we dynamically apply an image to a div based on some data that we got from our backend database. Is everyone seeing that? All right. How are we doing out there in chat? Are we seeing that? Cool. All right. So any questions on what we've done so far? Awesome. All right, so our product page is basically done. If you want to add more to it, feel free to experiment with it, maybe link to other things, or try to implement a back button. You can just use the browser's back button because of the way React Router is working. Okay, cool. Here, I can sit back, and it's going to go back to the last spot I was at. But I'll leave that maybe as homework if you guys want to try to implement a back button using React Router. What would you import in there to create that particular back button? And then what's the route that you'd want to use? Okay, so that is all good. Let's check what else on our inventory page we've got going on. We've got some sorting. I think we'll save sorting for a little later. We want to get some other stuff going on here. We want to start working on our shipments page, because these also have links that go there as well. So we want to try to get more of the structure of our application finished. We basically have an inventory page where we can see the various data regarding if we have RDs, we got links to the product information, and we have some quantities, all the data that the backend is serving up to us. So we want to do the same thing with shipments. We want to grab that data from the backend and display it, and then format it on the screen. All right. So actually, I think what we'll do is we'll take our break now. We'll say 15 minutes. We'll come back at 7:30 on the dot. And then for the remainder of the time, we'll start creating our shipments page. Sound good? All right. So we shall return. Okay, and we're back. All right. So you don't necessarily need to pull from it. What we're going to do is you already have the files created, right? You already have the product.js file and the table.js file, right? So all you really need to do, let me just pull up the repo. Backup state. I will post this in the chat again. Okay, so inside the components folder, so if you follow the link in the Slack chat, it'll take you right to the folder. And then you could just open these up and copy and paste into your file. So you don't have to pull down the repo and try to figure out how to get it in there. Just open this up, copy it in, and paste it in your component file. All right, so before we start coding again, we'll just start talking about some other things that we want to do. Okay, so on the inventory page, we're almost there. We'll do some sorting at some point. And then shipments, we want to get the overall page kind of, I was going to say sketched out, but we'll get it kind of just set up. Same thing how we did with inventory to start. So we'll just take note of the things that we're going to want to do. On this one, it looks like a table, but in fact, it's an unordered list. It's just styled similarly. Bootstrap gives you some styles to basically make everything look kind of like they belong together. If we go over to the React strap documentation, we have to type out 500 styles. And we go to components, and there's something called a list group. So you can see this is that same visual we're seeing over here. So we're going to use this thing called a list group, and that's the parent, and it takes a bunch of children called list group items. So we can use this structure to create our list of table-like data in our shipments page. Put my stuff over here. But first we'll need, well, we already have a shipments.js file, and it just got some basic boilerplate in it. So we're going to start adding to that. Right. And right now it's just nothing. So we'll close out everything here. So we only have, I'm going to increase the font a little bit. Is this okay? Was this where we were? Okay. All right, so I'm going to start up npm, no, not up here. Let's start up npm start and npm run JSON server because I had to do some stuff on the break there. And once that loads, make sure I still see data. Cool. All right. So shipments. We're going to get rid of this p tag. And we're going to give our parent div a class name. We'll call it shipments-page. We'll tie into our CSS file. Put an H4 in here, or whichever element you want to use. We'll just say shipments. You could have changed that p tag to an H4 too, if you didn't want to delete it. And now we have something that looks like inventory without inventory. We just have this basic page. Okay. Now, just like inventory imported some data from the backend and gave it to a table component, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to import some stuff from the database for our shipments and pass it to a shipments list component. But first, of course, we'll need to make sure that we have some data flowing into here. So again, we'll use the use state and use effect again. Now, eventually, we're going to get rid of these use effects in favor of using a state management solution. But I want to get you used to like pulling data and the patterns of pulling data, right? So we're going to take all of that stuff and move it to one central location that all of our components will have access to, rather than pulling in the data in each and every component to get access to it. I mean, this works for this tiny little app. You could totally do this and that would be perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But as your app grows, it's going to get tiring to type out that stuff over and over and over again. So that's where state management solutions are going to shine. And we'll take a look at that very first thing on Monday. After a presentation, I believe there's another speaker. But we'll get right into state management. And we'll do that for a good portion of the first part of the week. Because there can be a lot to it, and I want to make sure it's understood clearly, right? I don't want to get overwhelmed, and there's a lot of options, so I'm going to go over the ones that are going to make sense for small projects or like your capstone projects, okay? But there's many options out there. Okay, so we're pulling in use state and use effect. First thing we'll do is we'll say, oops, const, and we'll just call this shipments, set shipments, shipments equals use state. And this is going to be, we'll just put in an empty array because we have an array of shipment data. If we look at our byte data.json file, we collapse product. No, not the whole thing. Shipments, very similar objects, right? We have IDs, except in this case, we have a product ID. So that will refer to this shipment is a shipment of a particular product. Here is the product ID for that, the product name, a quantity of how many are coming in the shipment, and whether or not this shipment has been received. So we can see the first one has been received, the second one has not. So we can style the data in our list based on whether it's not it's been received. What makes sense to the user? How would the user know that this data has been injected into their inventory, right? Okay, so that's what we're working with, an object with 5 properties, or a list of objects with 5 properties. And now we need to grab that data from the back end. So we'll say use effect. And set up our base here. So first thing's your function that's going to be called, and then your list of dependencies. And you're probably seeing a lot of warnings that dependencies are not being used in the components where your hooks are happening, and we're going to go over that. I did mention it a little briefly the other day of what that dependencies list is, but we're going to examine it a little bit closer tonight, just to make sure that it's clear that that's what it's for. Okay. So let's fetch from our backend, localhost 3001/shipments. And then once we get that, we'll get our response, and we'll JSONify it, if that's a word. And now we have some shipments. I already used the word shipments. Shipment data. Words and naming things. So all we really want to do right now, because we're not filtering anything out right now, we're going to be passing this data along to our list component. So we're just going to put that whole thing right into our shipments variable up top. So we'll say oops, shipment data goes to set shipments, and we'll pass in our shipment data. That's really all we want to do right now. Everything compiles, that's good. Is everyone at this point?
Yeah, I don't quite get a square bracket like after the, on the next line.
This one?
Yeah,
It says it doesn't like it.
no, I don't understand why it's that.
Oh, that's the part we're going to get into
Oh,
with the
okay.
dependencies list.
Okay.
In fact, we'll do that next after this next step. So we want to make sure that our data is coming in. So underneath shipments, we'll do that pre-tag again, that pre-formatted text. Curly braces to evaluate some JavaScript, and we'll say json.stringify, and we'll stringify our shipments that should have came in. And I like to do null and 2 just for some nice formatting on the screen. It's easier to read. Save that. If I look at my shipments page, I should see some data. I'll leave this on the screen. Is anyone seeing data yet? Are we seeing data out in the chat? Or are there any questions from chat? I'll let them respond. Okay. Are you good? You good?
Yeah, I'm missing the HTTP.
Oh, okay.
Localhost. That's why it wasn't-
A little important. All right, excellent. Good over here, good back there. How are we doing over here? So inside, do you have a terminal? You've done npm start, right? You already have 2 open right now. Open this up. What's on this one? This is, okay, so this is your dev server, your React. Go back to your. Just put. Well, you're in the data directory. So, yeah, cd space dot dot. Go back up one. Then cd into the client folder. And do, yeah, both ends have both of them are going to run a script that's in this file for this particular folder. What did you call it?
NPM run.
NPM run is on server.
Or you need to So can you PWD? Oh, yeah, you need to go into byte and then into client. I guess I could byte. Yeah. Okay, and now you would type npm run JSON dash server. Yep.
I'm not getting it on my shipments.
On your shipments. Okay, let's take a look. What do you see in your screen? Okay, go back to the shipments page. Let's double check your route for the app.js. Oh, you're missing a slash in front of shipments. Let's try that.
Yay. Thank you.
Type one key and yay. That's it's. This is the life of a developer. Okay. Yep, we've got some. Oh, okay. Delay in YouTube. All right. So we can close byte data.json. Excuse me. Because we're seeing some stuff on screen right now. Now that we have that on the screen, we know we're getting our data. Let's talk a little bit about what this dependencies array means. So use effect is a hook that is going to be called depending on what, it will be invoked depending on when, on your dependencies array. If there's something in there that's changing, let's say, for example, it's empty. So if it, let's start there. If your dependencies array is empty, it's going to fire the first time the component renders. It's always going to fire the first time the component renders, no matter what. Every time the component re-renders, use effect will fire if some conditions. So the first condition, it's going to fire on the first one always. The next time it re-renders, it's only going to fire if this array has some data in it that has changed. And what I mean by that is, as a dependency, I could say, I could put shipments in as a dependency. So when this component re-renders, if React sees that this shipments variable is holding new data, it's going to call use effect. If it sees that the shipments data has not changed, it will not call use effect. Why would it? Because this is a dependency. You should only be calling this if one of these dependencies has changed. And you can have multiple dependencies. You can say, oops, you can say shipments, set shipments. Now you don't really need, that function will never change, right? It's already defined. It's not going to change. But you could do that. You know, there could be 20 dependencies in this array. If any one of those things changes, it's going to call use effect the next time that component renders. So that's what this is used for. So if you have it just empty, it's going to fire the first time, as always. And it's going to say, hey, what's changed in this array? Nothing. I'm not looking at anything. Therefore, I'm never going to call it again. Right? So that's the basic premise behind when this use effect is going to fire.
So when you say use effect and it does it the first time, that was what put the data on my page?
Yes, because
Okay.
we can count on use effect always firing the first time the component renders, because it's just going top to bottom. It's just reading code and it's just executing, right? But now that it's got to use effect, it says, oh, I see that that second parameter, you gave me a list of dependencies. Now I'm going to pay attention to that. If anything in there changes, I'll call this thing again. But if it doesn't, I'm going to skip it. Yes.
Your dependencies depend on like whatever you're using, the use state function. They always have to be that constant, whatever you're.
Right. If you're doing something with that data, there's a chance you're going to need it as a dependency because it's related somehow, right? In our case, we're only going to fire it once when the component renders because that's all we need it for at this point. We're not really depending, it's not dependent, that component's not depending on that data anymore because it's going to forward it on down, right? It's like, okay, I did my job. Now it's up to you, right? Shipments list, go. So that's all we need to do is just load it that one time. Because every time we hit this route, if we try to go to that route again and it's already on the screen, why do we need to get the data again, right? But if we navigate away and then we navigate back, well, once we navigate away, that component is unmounted from the DOM. It doesn't need to be there. So all that stuff goes away. So when it gets re-rendered, it says, oh, it's like I'm rendering it for the first time again. Call this use effect. And it'll call it for the quote unquote first time, even though you may have gone back and forth from this route many times. Okay?
So in other words, it won't change unless like somebody in receiving scans something in. Now there's a change in the actual, now the company has received something. let's say, and they scan it in. And then now we have now we have just received a shipment, so now it's gonna re-run.
So somewhere in your app, something has been triggered that says this has been received. You should re-render this thing.
Okay,
And it's like, oh, now we're paying attention to this. I should probably re-render, right? I've got new data coming in. That's a good example. Yep.
so it would change while you're looking at it? Like you don't have to do
If your
anything else?
application is set up that way, yes.
Okay.
Yep. That's like a yes and no answer. Only if your application is set up to like listen for this data in real time and then respond to it. Okay. So does everyone understand the dependencies array? Does that make sense? Now there's more aspects to use effect. Use effect you can return something from use effect. We're not going to use that in this particular application, but right now it's kind of like it's what's called a void function. It gets called and that's it. It doesn't expect anything to be returned, right? We're not returning anything. It just goes and does its thing. If we do return something from use effect, we would return a function. And that function is designed to act like the component will unmount lifecycle hook or lifecycle method in class components. So when you start up a class component, it renders and it'll say component did mount. If you have a function for this, fire it, right? When React says, okay, I can see something's changing in the application, I need to unmount this component. Right before that happens, it's going to call component will unmount. So if you have some logic to clean up some event handlers that you may have thrown into the DOM, right? Click event handlers are floating out there like wildfire, right? You don't want to have the user accidentally trigger one of those if what they're targeting is no longer on the screen. That's going to throw some errors. It's going to cause some mayhem. Terrible idea. Don't do that. So React gives you a way to kind of clean up after yourself. If you've thrown a lot of stuff into the DOM, you could say, okay, on component will unmount, delete all these event handlers so that we're kind of cleaning up after ourselves. Use effect is doing the same thing when you return a function from it. It's saying, okay, I see use effect was called, it returned me a function. So React is waiting around for this thing to be unmounted. And when it gets unmounted, it's going to call that function. And that function will have your logic to say, okay, delete this event handler, scroll back to the top, or whatever logic needs to happen, right? We're not going to be using that in this application because there's really no need for us to. But I want to let you know that that's there. And the official React site, the reactjs.org, the documentation for their hooks is really good. And you can find anything you'd want to need to know in there. So I would encourage you to look at it if you're going to continue to use hooks. And there's like, a million blog posts on it by now. It's been around for a little while and it's not going away. People are loving it. And I use it at work all the time now. I'm not going back to class components. And it's definitely worth reading up more on, right? Most of the time you're going to use state and use effect and probably maybe use reducer, maybe not. There's a bunch of them. Most of them you probably won't ever use. Probably use state the most because components can have state and that's really cool and we can manage the data in our application. So you'll see these pretty much all the time. The rest of them occasionally. Excuse me, just need to take a drink. Okay. All right, so now everything's still rendering. That's good. So now we need to create this list that's going to render our data instead of just throwing some JSON object at our wallpaper here, right? To a developer, this looks great. To your user, probably not. Okay, so let's get rid of the pre-tag. Well, we'll leave it there. That way we have a reference to it, so we don't have to keep jumping back between the JSON file. And above it, we want to create a list here. Now, I could just start creating the list in here, and that would be fine. But we're going to create a new component just to get used to that whole modular design. If you ever created another type of list, let's say a different type of shipments list, let's say a different vendor or something, and you want to reuse that shipments list, you don't want to have to type that code out twice. You just create a component for it and then import that component where you need it. So in components folder in our project, we'll create a new file. Call it shipmentslist.js. All right, so we're going to import React from React. And we're also going to use React strap in this. So that list group, if you head over to the, I'll put this in the chat real quick if you want to jump over to it without thinking about it. This is a nice little structure, so we're going to use this. So we need to import list group and list group item from React strap. So we're going to import list group and list group item from React strap. Right? Did I spell that right? Good. We'll create our function called shipments list. And we'll just put in just a div. We'll do our list group. And inside here, we'll have some list group items in just a moment. For now, we're going to export default shipments list. I'll let you guys finish typing that. Okay.
I'm in React strap on the page you sent.
Okay.
List group, just
Yep.
all of that.
Yeah, we're going to import this here. You can literally just copy and paste that if you want.
The first 2 lines.
The first 2 lines, yep. All right, and then we'll type this out here. We're not going to fill in the list group items just yet. Well, we can do the first list group item. But the rest of them, is just to show, let me go back to the documentation real quick. So this is what this looks like when it's rendered. We have 5 items here. We can see 5 list group items. Each one contains this text. But if we look over at our demo app here, we can see all of our data, but the first line is dedicated to like headers, like table headers. So we're going to probably want to put that in because we're not getting that from our data, right? All it's doing is giving us the raw data. So we'll have to kind of recreate, quote unquote, a table type structure to make it look like a table, when in fact we're just going to use a bunch of list items. So to do that, there's a bunch of ways you can do it. Bootstrap has a nice little grid system. You can set up rows and columns, just like you can in, it's similar to the concept to using a table. So for each row, it can contain a bunch of columns, and those columns can have a maximum width value. Bootstrap allows you to have 12 column widths in a row. So you could have 3 columns, give them each a width of quote unquote 4, and that will be your total 12. Or you can have a row with 1 column of width 12, and that'll take up the entire. It's basically telling it how much space to take up in that row, right? So if I have a row that has 1 element that's 12, it's going to take up the whole thing. If the next row has 2 columns and they're both 6, that'll take up 12. And if I have another one that has 1 column that takes up 2, that's going to be a lot shorter than the other 2 above it. So we're going to take up 2 of those maximum 12 like units within that row. So did you guys use rows and columns with any bootstrap styling before? Does that feel familiar? So I'm sorry, Max did? Okay. All right, so we're gonna do something similar, but we're gonna use the elements from from React Strap. And we're gonna do this. So our first item is gonna be a list group item because that's what needs to be in the list group. And we're gonna need to import some stuff. We're gonna need to import row and column. They call it col. So our rows and columns. And the first thing we're going to do is render a row because columns have to be in rows. And we have, if we look at our app, we have ID, product, quantity, and a space for a receiving button. So we have 4 columns. Oops. We'll set up the first column. We'll call this ID. Now column, in Bootstrap, if you were just to type out the class, you don't have to type this part. This is just for illustration purposes. You would say col dash, and then the size that you'd want to use. So for small screens, I would say SM dash, and then how many units it takes up. So React Strap helps us out a lot here, where we can just give it the size and then a unit number. So if we want this to, on a small screen, we'd want this to be equal to 2. And then if there's anything, it's basically from small on up, we'll use this width, unless you have another size that's also appended there. So if I were to say MD, which is medium, 6, as soon as the screen gets to size medium, it's going to change to 6 units across the screen. But if I don't define anything other than the small, it's small and on up. We'll always use 2. Okay. So with that, we're going to add another column. We'll use this for our product. We want this to take up 3 units. And then a third column for a quantity. I'm just going to put QTY. And we'll just do 2 because that'll be it's just going to be a small number. So we don't have to worry about overflowing on this one. And the last one, I'm just going to leave theirs blank. So I could just do this, just so that I know that there's a 4th column. I don't have to put this there. It will render fine below it, or this isn't an actual table, but this is kind of a reminder myself to say, hey, there's another column that's going to be in these rows below it. I probably want to pay attention to that. So if I go to my app, I don't see anything yet because I haven't imported this component yet. But let's take a look. Let's go to shipments. We're going to import our new component. So import shipments list from shipments list. I almost said Schindler's List.
Wow.
I was like, we don't want to import from there.
No. Gosh.
All right, so
You do like comments.
okay. So now that we have this component imported, let's render it. See what we get. That's just a self-closing tag. And I see a single row with a bunch of JSON underneath it. And I have ID, product, quantity, and I know there's some blank column over here. So I'll leave this on the screen. Is anyone seeing this yet?
columns are
What's
not
that? Oh.
fine.
Oh, you'll need to import them from, so inside shipments list at the top, they're all these elements are coming from React Strap. So you've got list group item, row, and col coming from React Strap.
So what's your, oh,
Just ID, product, and quantity. Okay, let's take a look. All right, we okay back over here? Yep. Okay. So now let's get our data into this thing. So under shipments, I am going to just cut out the pre-tag, and I'm going to paste it underneath my list group. I want to see this. I still want to see this information, but I want to know that it's rendering inside my shipments list, not my shipments.
okay, so did you, I'm sorry, did you erase it or cut it from?
Yep, I cut it out of shipments, and I paste it into shipments list. Excuse me, underneath the list group, but before the end closing div. Okay. So in shipments, I can pass this in as a prop, but I don't have any props defined yet. Right, so if I go to shipments list, I come up to my function parameters. I want some props to come in here. So down here, JSON.stringify shipments, I want this to be props.shipments, right? Because props is an object, shipments is going to be a key on that object. If I go to my shipments.js file and where I'm declaring this, the shipments list tag, I would say shipments equals in curly's my shipments.
Where do I create?
Yeah, I cut it out and I put it inside the shipments list because this is where we really want to render our data. We're just using shipments to pass it along. Right, so shipments is the page, but the shipments list component is going to actually display all that data for us.
Could you go back to shipments?
Mhm.
For a second? Shipments.
So if I look at my page, I still see the data. So I know it's working. I know my shipments are inside the shipments list. And just to make sure I really am doing this, I'm just going to put a line break in here. I see it visually move down, so I know I'm still rendering it. I do little things like that all the time. Like I'll do something like this. I just want to know that it's there, right? That makes me feel good about myself. That I'm actually, I'm on the happy path here to making this work.
I'm having a problem. Go back to
Shipments. Yeah.
that curly bracket. So it's just.
Yep. Because that's the const we defined on line 5. That's going to hold our shipments JSON. Okay. So now that we have this data flowing in here, we're going to need more list group items. But we're not going to start typing out list group items because we don't know exactly which data is coming. Like the component doesn't know what data is going to come in here. So we can't really hard code anything. So who wants to guess at how we're going to get all these list group items rendered?
Soft code.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I said soft code.
Soft code. Listen, I haven't heard that one yet.
Jeremy or saying something.
We're going to map over it. So after our first list group item, we want to start rendering more list group items still inside the list group tag. And we know we're getting props, not porps. Props.shipments. We know that's an array of items. We'll do .map. And that takes a function. Let's see what I want to do. Actually, I'm going to do open close parentheses. So right now we should see line 16 to 18 should look like this. So we have our props.shipments. We're going to map over it. And for each shipment, we're going to render something, right? We're going to render a list group item. But when we return an array of components or array of elements, we need to make sure we give it a key so React doesn't yell at us. A unique key, every shipment has a unique ID. So we'll use shipment.id for that unique key. If the item that you're rendering doesn't have a unique identifier, your kind of like last resort could be the index of the map function that you're defining. Typically, that's not really desirable, right? Because that it's only unique in this instance. In some cases, it's fine. But if you've got a lot of data, you probably want to make sure it's got some unique identifiers on it. But for now, we're just going to use the shipment ID. And that should render out a bunch of items. So on your screen, you should see something like this. You've got a row with some text in it and 4 empty rows. Because there's 4 items. It's rendering 4 list group items. There's nothing in them, but React or Bootstrap is still going to style them because React Strap says, hey, there's this list group item, there's these classes on it, go render that thing, right? Even though there's nothing contained within it. Everyone with me so far? No?
Go to your shipments.
Shipments.js? Yep. Here, let's take a look. Oh, shipments list. Oh, go to your function with props.
Many things.
Go back to your browser and just refresh. Oh, go back to sorry, go back to shipment. Oh, go back to shipments list. Oh, shipments. That should hopefully do that. Yes. All right. So let's get some data in these rows. We're going to use the same structure as the hard-coded row. So we've got a row with 4 columns in it. So inside this one, in fact, let's just do this. Let's copy our list group item. We'll paste it here. give our list group item a key of shipment.id. So now we have the structure there. Your screen will look something like this at this point. Okay. So what type of stuff do we want to put in here? Probably what our headers tell us, right? So we have, the first one will be shipment.id. Next one will be shipment.product. Now there's no shipment.qty. Instead there's, oops, shipment.quantity. Just want to make sure that that spelling is correct. And your screen should start looking like this. Is anyone seeing data yet? Now that fourth column, you can see is a button. So we're going to import a button from React. We'll make this, instead of self-closing tag, we'll have our button in here. And we're going to have to give it some widths too. We'll say SM equals 5. 5 should be good. And then we'll have our button. And what does our button say? Our button says receive. Our button takes some props too for styling it. So we'll say color equals primary. And that just means the primary color that Bootstrap has decided to be for the phrase primary. So in Bootstrap, there's basically contextual colors. You've got your primary color. You have a warning color, a danger color, a success color, an info color. It's just whatever they decided these mean conceptually for you or contextually for you. So if you see a red button, it kind of jumps out at you more than a blue one, right? Like, whoa, danger. Do you really want to click this? Do you really want to delete your account? Stuff like that. All right. So our screen, oh, that's the demo. We're getting there.
We imported button up top too.
We have to import button. I'm also going to give it a size equals SM. So that just shrinks it down a little bit. Those buttons were a little too large for my taste. All right. So now we have our basic structure. We've got some data flowing in. We've got about 7 minutes left. So we're going to do one more thing with this button. Well, two more things. First, we needed to do something in the meantime. We're going to go over how this ties into state and routing together next week. But for now, we just wanted to actually do something. We don't want to just sit there. We can't click it. Well, we can click it, but we want some sort of satisfaction that when we click a button, something happens, right? So we're going to give it an on-click event. And we'll just do an anonymous function. And I'm just going to alert something to the screen. I'm just going to say to be implemented. Or not yet implemented. Anyone using .NET Framework will smile at that. No? When you stub out, it just says that the console's out, not yet implemented.
Oh.
Oh, okay, all right. I heard the unison, oh. All right.
No.
Nope, I just saved.
First on click.
OnClick is on the button tag.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry, yeah, it reformatted it when I saved. Yeah. All right, so real quick, I'm gonna click the button just to make sure. I see it's not yet implemented. I know my button is working. It's clickable. It's sized properly. I like the color. Everything's fine and dandy. But there's one more thing that we need to think about. So if you remember back to the bytedata.json, my shipments, my first shipment is received is set to true. My next ones are false. So in my UI, how would I know that that's been received? Right? Visually, I can't tell. Right? It's in my list. I don't know if it's been received. What if I click it again and there's an error because I can't find it, or it adds it twice or something like that, right? So visually, we want to let the user know what type of action they can take, if any. So this is where that contextual color comes into play. So a button that's blue seems pretty friendly. I think I want to click on that. If a button was, say, grayed out, well, it's probably disabled. Maybe it's been received. Or maybe I don't want to display a button at all. Right? Maybe I want to display something else. Maybe some message that says, this has been received. And then the user would know, oh, it's there. I don't need to take any further action. So we're going to do that. So we go back to our shipments list. Add some space around my button, because I want some logic here to say, if this has been received, do something. If it's not been received, show the button. So the first thing we'll handle is, by default, if I go to a shipments page and there's shipments waiting to be received, my thought is, it's not received yet. That's why I'm going there. So I'm going to handle the not yet received logic first. It's just the way my brain thinks. You can change it around if you want to. So there's a property on each object that is received. So we want to use that. It's just a true or false. So it's a Boolean. So that's really easy to work with. So if I say bang shipment is received, like basically shipment is received. If it's not, like if this is false, I want to display a button. I'm going to put some open parentheses for now. Otherwise, it's been received, so I need to display something else. I'm just going to put a span that says received. Why is that not liking that? Oh, not evaluating it. Oh, because there's nothing in here. Okay, so I'm going to take my button, cut it and paste it between these parentheses, and save that. I know that formatting just completely made everything vertical. But if we look at this, we could see if the shipment is not received, so if is received is false, I'm going to display a button to receive it. Otherwise, I'm going to display a span that says it's been received. So if I look at my UI, I can clearly see this one's been received. These have not. So that's just how what's the word I'm looking for? That's being a good custodian of your user interface, right? I don't know if that custodian is the right word, but it's treating your users well, right? You're giving them a pleasurable experience. If everything shows as a button and it's been received, well, how do I know it's been received, right? The user doesn't know. So just by showing different things in context here, the user experience is better. All right, makes sense. I'll keep this on the screen. We've got 1 minute left. Is there, I know some people are typing to catch up, but are there any other questions regarding what we've done today? Is there anything that seems confusing still, or has anyone said, oh, I totally get this concept now, or anything like that? Anything from chat? Is everyone seeing, or anyone seeing this on their screen? Okay. I see nodding heads, so that's good. Anyone in remote land have any questions? Or are you seeing this on the screen?
Yeah, I did something else. I don't know the data. I had the table, but not the data.
Okay, so, okay, take a look at that. Awesome, very good. Okay, so homework for tonight, or for the weekend. Also, I'll have to figure out what office hours are going to be. This weekend's a little hectic for me. I have to photograph some stuff for some clients on Saturday, so Saturday's kind of out. It'll probably more likely be either sometime tomorrow or Sunday morning-ish. All right. It so happened that my wife scheduled me for a photo shoot on Saturday up in Alexandria Bay. So several weeks in advance, so I can't exactly cancel it last minute. That's not really good business practice, so I'll have to be up there. So for this weekend's homework, let's see, the table in our inventory, if we look at our React application, let me go to the demo app when that's built. There's some sorting logic going on. So your homework is to research how to sort text and numbers in JavaScript. So research the different ways that you can perform sorts, and we're going to implement that next week. How to sort in JavaScript. All right. And then I'll just put a reminder in the Slack as well. So with that, we're going to close out the stream, and we'll see everyone either in office hours or on Monday.
Research ways